Hi, I'm Jeff Murphy, and today we're going to talk about using camera raw files in Adobe Photoshop. If you don't use camera raw file, your camera raw format already, you should be, provided you have a DSLR and it has camera raw, because they are lossless, so you won't get any image degradation like you would get with a JPEG. And they provide you with a great deal of flexibility when opening your file and processing your file. It's a pretty big extension of Adobe Photoshop and its capabilities by shooting in camera raw. There's a lot of great things that can come from using camera raw files. So while they're bigger, they're very, very helpful. So we are going to use today the picture that you sort of see behind this title. It was my son, who is 3, his very first digital SLR picture that he took. He was able to hold the camera for the first time and actually press the little shutter release button with his little 3-year-old fingers. So this image is courtesy of Quinn that we're going to start with today. We're using this one because it is a bit underexposed. It has a lot of grain to it because it was shot indoors with a very high ISO setting on the camera. Okay, so let's flip over to Bridge here for a minute. Let's go ahead and minimize this and flip to Bridge. And Bridge is part of Photoshop. It's an extension of it. It comes with Photoshop, I should say. A separate program. It comes with Photoshop. You can get to it from within Photoshop. I have Bridge open at startup, so all my files are there. And I use it to keyword everything, so I can simply type in Quinn up here and hit return, which I've already done. And you can see all the stuff I have for Quinn. You can also, you can say, oh, I love that picture right there. Quinn, even though he just had a popsicle, as you can see, not very happy. I could say, hey, that's a great picture. I'm going to give that a 5-star rating. And then later on, you can say, I'm going to sort this stuff. I'm going to sort it by rating. And there's the sad Quinn that just came up. And here's Quinn and Barley 2012 folder that has all the stuff in here. And down here, look at these. Actually, let's leaf through some of these. So there's the one Quinn took, but these are what got him excited about taking the pictures. I was taking photographs of him with Barley. He's a lot cuter than me. Maybe I should just I should just use one of these pictures. Pretty hilarious. Barley is the most cooperative dog in the entire world. She's suppressing a lot of internal hyperness at this point. Oh, there's Quinn. He's starting to take over here. All right. And there's me giving Quinn some advice, of course, since I'm a teacher. And Quinn is my little student. All right, so let's use this photograph here. It's CR2. That's the Canon Camera Raw extension. And we'll just control-click on it and say Open a Camera Raw, which would be the default anyway. It's just by habit I do that. Okay, here we go. As I said, it's underexposed. If we look at the shadow detail here. It's got a serious amount of grain because, as I also mentioned, it was taken inside, gray morning. Those are in my jammies still. Barley's in her jammies. You can see there's some color noise around her nose. She's not really green. You might be able to see that little green. So it's not an awesome technical picture. Some strobes, we don't have fill, it's some fluorescent lighting. And that's why we're using it, because I want to see how much better we can make this in our camera raw processing dialogues. Okay, so we'll start here. We'll look at it at 100%. So, oopsie daisy, let's go back to 100%. And a lot of the same keyboard commands are the same in camera raw, in your camera raw window as in Photoshop, so I can get my little grabber hand with my space bar, and we'll put Barley there front and center. Okay, so first of all, just click on the first icon. We have the zoom tool selected over here, but you'll recognize a bunch of these icons from Adobe Photoshop. They're similar: a crop tool, sampling tools, that sort of thing. All right, so the temperature. The temperature is the Kelvin temperature of the light. We can adjust this to the left to make it cooler, adjust this to the right to make it warmer. don't really think I need to change that much. I had the white balance already set for the camera for as best as I could do for the fluorescent bulbs we had in our light source. So there's a tint. Those are both very explanatory, so you can't really go wrong with those. Exposure, and it's best pretty much to work from the top down. This is underexposed, and some of these that are more global, I have to back up here, do Command minus to zoom out. So exposure, I could pump this up a little bit, but I got to be a little careful because Barley is white. She has a white coat, white paws, and a white chest. I don't want to lose that highlight detail there, so I have to be real careful, but I should bring up some of the shadow detail here. So I shouldn't just jam the exposure up this way because that'll make it look pretty awful. So I'll take it a few points here. And at any point, I can hit P. That'll turn on this little preview icon, turn it on and off so I can see my before and after. This is where I started. There's a little bit more exposure right there. It's an off-white wall up here, so we want to keep that. Okay, recovery. When I jam this up, that takes my highlights that I've just blown out a little bit, like on Barley's chest right here, and starts bringing those back in. All right, so pull some of those back in. Now I don't really need to recover that much here. One good thing about the tungsten light, didn't really have too many specular highlights or anything like that to worry about. Fill light's going to be more important. Let's go over here to an area of black. Fill lights will help bring my blacks back in. So I pull that up, and of course, anytime you try to pump up your shadow detail, it's going to really show you the noise that you have, because the noise is most prevalent in the shadow areas, so you can see the noise coming out. And again, I picked this for a reason. I want to see that noise coming out just so I can try to get rid of it later on. That's my example. In my dark hoodie, you can also see some noise coming up there. All right, let's back up a little bit here so we can see the whole thing overall. You can see I'm starting to get some separation in here from that pillow to that pillow, and that's a good thing. So, we've got some fill light there. Cool. This is a little dirty from Barley's paws all over the couch. Yeah. Okay. Blacks will bring the blacks back in, but of course that works sort of against what we were doing. So you got to be gentle with that. And of course you're looking at your histogram here. It's showing your red, green, and blue histograms as well as your white, which is a combination of the three values. And again, let's hit P to see our befores and afters. So there's before, there's after. You can tell it's looking a lot better than when I started. All right. We won't adjust the contrast and the brightness are pretty self-explanatory. But how about clarity, vibrance, and saturation? Well, if you forget what any of these do, you know, you guys are visual artists, so you can just try to see what happens. You can see there, look in my face tones. It's bringing out a little bit of contrast around my face. I tend to not play with the clarity too much. Vibrance and saturation are similar in the sense that they're going to saturate colors, but they do it differently. Saturation will saturate all the colors. Even if you have something that's super saturated already, it'll saturate it even more, which usually makes it look artificial and fake. If you have like my green hoodie, or you can't have a big yellow dog, that doesn't look cool. Well, unless of course you have a big yellow dog, but Barley's not so yellow so much as tan. Vibrance, however, works a lot better for most of the situations I've photographed under, in that it increases the saturation of stuff that doesn't have much saturation, but if something's already saturated, it won't hypersaturate it. It won't make it really, really intense. So, like, I have a pretty bright green shirt on here. It won't make that green so intense that it looks garish, but it'll bring up the saturation in Barley a little bit, and everything just a little bit. So I'll go ahead and turn that just up a hair. Okay, so let's move from left to right here. We have curves. I'm not going to adjust the curves on this one, although this might have been a good place to explore an inverted S-curve to bring up some of the shadow detail. Save that for another demo. But here's where I want to be with the sharpening. Because here's where some of the newer noise reduction stuff exists, which is going to be super, super important. So for this, I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to 100% so I can really see what's happening, or even 200%. Again, let's put barley here front and center. And let's blow this up even a lot more so we can see the detail here. Although normally I would look at it at 100%. Since I'm doing a video, I'm afraid you won't see it if I don't blow it up too much. So 200%. That's what we're doing. Okay, so the sharpening amounts. Now, I have to tell my students to be very gentle with this, because if you turn it up too much, it looks like a overly sharpened photograph, because really it's basically increasing the contrast between neighboring pixels. And usually you want to stay somewhere in the default range with this. And the general rule of thumb is, if it's a portrait or something like that, where you're in close, you want this a little bit lower, and if it's something with a lot of edge detail, like a architectural something or other, turn this up a little bit more. But it's best to do sharpening in steps. Like a little bit of sharpening when you open it up, a little bit of sharpening when you're working on it within Photoshop, and sometimes when your final document is done in Photoshop, you can sharpen it a little bit more just before printing it. Alright, so don't try to get all your sharpness right here, and don't try to use sharpening to make up for the fact that you didn't use a tripod like I didn't. Well, Quinn. I'm going to blame it on Quinn. He didn't use a tripod in this. Okay, radius. So the more you jammer this radius up, the more intense your sharpening becomes. And so again, with the radius, if it's something like architectural with a lot of detail, turn this up a hair more. If it's something without too much detail, turn it down. I tend to not use this over 1. Maybe like 1.2, 1.5 would be the highest I would go. Alright, detail. We'll turn this up for details a little bit. And masking is super important. Like if I go to my face, this actually will have to use my face here, and I'll start to turn this up. Now basically how this works is, you see how my face is starting to look a little bit different there? Let's pull it back down here again. See all the grain in there? And you see when I take that off, it starts to go away. It's not going away everywhere as I turn the masking up. What will remain are the areas of high contrast, like where there's this ear, where it goes, like this edge right here on Barley's ear. When I turn this masking up, that won't really be affected right along here, but my face will, because there's not a lot of contrast in my skin tone. You know, there's not really a lot of dots on my face like that. But this edge would be formed by neighboring pixels that have some contrast to them, right? Lighter pixels here, darker pixels here. So when I turn up the masking, what it's doing is just telling the computer, you know, if there's not a lot of contrast between the pixels, don't sharpen them. And if there's a lot of contrast between the pixels, sharpen it. All right, so edge sharpness remains, but your basic sharpness in areas with little edge detail aren't sharpened. All right, so this is good because if I turn this up pretty high, it starts taking all the grain off my face. Now, this is a really grainy picture, so you can see it working some, but it won't do everything without us going to noise reduction, because this picture has a lot of noise. Okay, and here's where we're going to jump this noise stuff to not go on drone on too long. But watch this. So this luminous slider is great. It takes out a lot of my noise, and of course the thing is, when you first see this, it looks like you have a blurrier picture, and you know it does have to blur these things a bit. But I can turn that luminance up to some, and I'll start taking this off. What I found, and then you can bring the detail back, which is, you know, the edge sharpness, by turning this luminance detail up. And I don't see if we'll see. We don't think we'll ignore luminance contrast for now because we can't really notice any difference with this image. But the color one I find more valuable. For example, like let's go back here to Barley's nose, where we have these green pixels caused by chromatic aberration. If you remember, chromatic aberration is basically caused because the red, green, and blue, all the different light wavelengths hit the CCD at slightly different areas and focus at slightly different areas on your CCD, and they give you this stuff called chromatic aberration. If you have a nice lens, you have less of that. It also depends on your focal length and your depth of field, your aperture that you're shooting at. So there's a lot of variables that will influence this. But you tend to see a lot more when you have not a very good lens and some pretty awful lighting. Okay, so how do we get rid of that? Well, that's what this color slider's for. I'm going to just jam that thing up all the way. You can see the beauty. I use this a lot for low light photographs. And you know, now that cameras have ISOs of like a gazillion million that are an incredible amount of very light sensitive, you get it. You know, the downfall of that is you get a lot of noise in your image. So this thing is great. This little color slider, turn up all the way. Notice that all that is gone. Here, let's hit the P again. Okay, that's what we're looking at right now. That's the before picture. See that all that green chromatic aberration is gone. Okay. Okay, and then the last thing is the color detail, which basically these. Now, if I turn this up all the way, the green starts to come back a little bit. I don't really need to use a slider at all. I'm just going to leave it pretty low, 20. Because I don't need any color edge sharpness, really. All right. So this color slider helped a lot. That's what gets rid of our funky green or red edges that sometimes manifest themselves, or purple edges or blue edges or whatever you're getting, depending on how your CCD was recording the light source. And we've also turned up the masking quite a bit to protect my face a little. And we can even, let's turn up the luminance just a hair more so that it pulls out less of the grain on my face. So we've used this noise reduction pretty extensively. Turned up the luminance some. We've jammered the color all the way up. Is jammered a word? I don't know, but it just means for me turned up a lot. We've turned up the color a lot. Quite a bit. Color slider here under noise. Okay. Let's pull back out of here again and do a before and after. Okay, now this preview is just affecting this set of sliders. Notice when I hit P or change the preview now, it's not showing me my original picture. It's just showing me what I've done under the sharpness window. If I want to see my original picture, I come back here to presets and hit P. So P under presets, entire picture. P under any one of these other icons, which is show me what's changed in that specific window. All right. So P is contextually sensitive. Okay, we're not going to do anything right here now in the HLS grayscale. We're not going to do any split toning. The lens correction is nice. You might note that there's a little bit of fall off here on my edges. Let's pull that up a little bit more. There's a little bit of fall off on my edges. I can click this Enable Lens Profile Correction and set it to auto. It will detect my lens because that was recorded with my camera raw data. It'll know what lens I used, and you can see, watch these edges and watch a little bit of the aberrations. Some of the distortion caused by my lens is fixed, so I can use that. I can set it to auto, or I can do custom. The auto, it's figured out what lens I used. This Canon 1785. It knows that, and then I can change these sliders down here. If I decide, the vignetting, it took out, but if I decide I want that back, I can put it back. It took out some of the chromatic aberration. And it took out some distortion, but if I decide I want to keep the distortion, which I'm gonna, because you don't really notice it, and it sort of actually brings me and Barley to the center and enlarges the hair, I'm going to keep the distortion. All right. We'll ignore that slider for now. And again, the presets is where you want to click, just so that if you want to uncheck this preview and see how far we've come. Look at that. Now, this would have benefited from actually having some fill flash maybe bounced off the top of the ceiling or some studio lighting. But it is 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning, so I really think this would have benefited a lot from a bigger cup of coffee. Although Quinn is not drinking coffee yet, so it wouldn't have benefited him. All right, when we're ready, just let me move this guy up. I'm starting to get some of these guys out of here. Like that. Okay, so down here we have open image. We can click to open image. We have a few ways to open this. If we click open copy, oh, I wanted to do one more thing before we move on. And that is to take my crop tool and crop this here, because we got this little toy on the table and we have a lot of fall off on the edges, and I'm not sure, and if I don't, and I don't want this stupid, well, I don't want this picture in there either. So I can say, okay, I want a 2:3 ratio because it's a 35mm camera, and I want some of Barley's paws, but I want to crop out a little bit of that, the paw prints down there. This needs to come down a hair. Now the cropping, I do the cropping here in Camera Raw because it's not really cropping the image. It's going to crop the image, duh, but but it won't actually crop the original data. The original data will still be there if I ever need to go back to my original file that has that. I think that's a Lightning McQueen car sitting down there. It'll still be there in the original file, but it'll open cropped like this in Photoshop, and that's what I want. And I will save this Camera Raw data automatically will be saved with this image, so it'll want to open up the next time this way, crop this way, but I can always go back and rethink that cropping if I want to. So I'm saved, I'm protected, my original image will always be there. Alright, so I double clicked on it to apply that crop, and the last thing we'll do is we'll just go back and look at my before and afters. It won't show me the crop before and after, but it'll show me everything else before I go ahead and open it. And so I was going to say open. I can do open a copy, although I don't normally need to do that, but I can even open a smart object if I want by holding down the shift key. We won't go into what smart objects are right now, but I have a quick little tutorial coming up that will explain smart objects for those who are interested. Alright, so we'll just open image. And then it'll pop open in Photoshop here in just a minute. Just got to apply all those little there's my old title bar, and there it is. Alright, looks a lot better. Thanks. Talk to you later.